Welcome back. Many thanks for joining us on this broadcast. Our post-election analysis continues here on KTN News. I am Ben Kitili, and tonight, for the next 1 hour or so, we shall be discussing, talking about a couple of things that happened during the day. We have seen a lot happen, especially at the coast, where the National Super Alliance did launch some campaign for truth and electoral justice for the polls, saying that they will not accept and move on. We did see a couple of governors also be sworn into office. Two female governors, that is Anne Waiguru, did take office in the county of Kirinyaga, as well as Joyce Laboso in the county of Bomet. And Governor 001 was also sworn in Mombasa, where he also said he will run for the presidency in 2022. We'll talk about all this, as well as what has been happening. We'll talk about the Game of Thrones that has been the dynasties of the Kenyatta and Odinga families, today being the 39th anniversary since the death of the father of the nation, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. We'll talk about all that here on this broadcast. My guests are already here with me. Dismas Mukwa, political risk analyst, political analyst, Hesbon Owila, and Jubilee strategist Mutinda Kamwa. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me tonight. And let's start with in one of those places where governors were sworn in, and that is in the county of Mombasa, where NASA leader Raila Odinga launched a campaign for truth and electoral justice in the country, which he says will help entrench and safeguard democracy in Kenya. And in a new twist regarding the petition filed by the opposition, NASA principals are also demanding that each of the 7 Supreme Court judges reads out their rulings when delivering their verdict, unlike in 2013 when a short verdict was read out by the former Chief Justice Dr. Willie Mutunga. Duncan Haemba has that report for us.
NASA presidential candidate Raila Odinga and his chief agent and NASA co-principal Musalia Mudavadi were here at the county of Mombasa for the swearing-in of Governor Ali Hassan Joho at the Mama Ngina Drive. It was the only inauguration ceremony he was attending, and Odinga explained why he was there.
Tumefika wakati ambapo wa Kenya mpaka waamke. Hii wizi ya kura mpaka ishe. Wizi ya kura mpaka ishe. Hii wizi ndio wa mwisho, na tutakubali wale viongozi ambao wametengenezwa na kompyuta waendelee kututawala. Hatutakubali. We shall not accept and move on. We shall not accept and move on. Hivyo kutoka Mombasa kuelekea bara ya Kenya yote, tunaambia Wakenya ya kwamba wakati imewadia wao kusimama ili watetee haki yao.
A tough-talking opposition chief says they will neither retreat nor surrender.
We will defend our political rights and democratic space. Let the agents of foreign powers exhorting us to accept and move on so that they can continue to have lackeys to do their bidding know that we will not accept inferior governance. We will resist and disobey illegitimate computer-generated leaders, and will not relent until the voices of the people, as expressed through the ballot, are heard and respected.
In what seems a calculated move to pile pressure on the Supreme Court, they placed a new demand.
Wakati huu tunataka tuone judgment ya kila judge wa Supreme Court. Hatutaki baada ya siku chache tuambiwe kwamba judgment ni ya dakika 2 alafu watu wanaondoka kwa podium.
We will defend our political rights and democratic space. Let the agents of foreign powers exhorting us to accept and move on so that they can continue to have lackeys to do their bidding know that we will not accept inferior governance.
Mombasa Governor Hassan Joho had set the stage earlier for NASA's bombshell.
For us to prosper, tunataka usalama na amani, sivyo? But that doesn't mean we cannot defend what rightfully belongs to us using peaceful and constitutional means. And therefore, like I said earlier, viongozi tutatoa mwongozo on how we're going to be moving forward.
We do not want to have our democracy castrated so that when people go to the polls, they are engaging in an impotent exercise.
We now find ourselves sharply divided between those who want us to accept and move on and those who are not prepared to live under authoritarianism of any kind. Dictatorships, once established, do not reform themselves. We belong to the category of those who refuse to give up our basic rights and civil liberties.
NASA's tough stand comes a week before the Supreme Court officially starts hearing their petition in which they are challenging President Uhuru Kenyatta's re-election. Duncan Hemba, KTN News.
Thank you, Duncan. The NASA principal, the presidential candidate, Raila Odinga, they are cranking up the pressure. Are we likely to see, is this likely to have any impact on the presidential election petition that is already before the Supreme Court?
Obviously it will, because we've been told by judges before, and I recall Justice Odunga said there are judges who write their rulings here. They actually live in Kenya. They don't come to the high courts and then, or the judiciary, and then at the end of the day they go to some other planet. They live and work here. But you are able to see a two-pronged strategy coming from NASA. Right now, what they're doing today is they're prosecuting their case in the court of public opinion. And you are able to see they're using very colorful language that every Kenyan would find it easy to understand. Like, for instance, when Musalia Mudavadi says that somebody is castrating democracy in Kenya, it's very easy for anybody to understand what he's talking about. And I think what they're trying to do outside applying pressure on the judiciary. And at some stage, you have people complaining that politicians are not supposed to be applying pressure on the judiciary. All over the world, even in the US, you see Barack Obama applying pressure on the Supreme Court, even Donald Trump. If you've got a view, you can express it, provided it's not sub judice. And right. For instance, what Musalia Mudavadi has indicated, that when they're going to do their judgments, it would be interesting in the interest of jurisprudence and for us to understand where the judges are coming from, for them to tell us how they've arrived at a particular ruling. You recall in 2013, people said the kind of ruling or judgment are given, people are very reluctant to quote it anywhere in the world. Scholars are unable to associate themselves with that kind of ruling. So when Musalia Mudavadi says we expect you to give us these, for every judge to give us his opinion, his writing, ratio decedent and everything, one shouldn't say that he's applying pressure. He's only asking them that this is regarded in the Commonwealth as a best practice. Please give us your reasoning. Not only for the...
Does it make any difference what we saw in 2013? Very short and precise reading of that last paragraph by former CJ Chief Willie Mutunga, or everybody, all the 7 judges coming up and reading their rulings. Does it make any difference?
It makes a huge difference. You know, when you're going to take a decision and you know it's going to be collective responsibility, that nobody will be able to point out that this judge has made this kind of ruling, this was his reasoning. It's very easy to hide in numbers. Say that you are 5 judges or 7 judges. Everybody can say, I had a very divergent contribution, but the pressure from other colleague judges was overwhelming, so I succumbed. But when you know that it's going to be individual responsibility and your name is going on the record for having given that kind of judgment, then a judge will want to be very careful, in as much as maybe they want to engage in mischief or they want to run away from the evidence as presented or the facts. Because you see, a number of these judges, some of them are very ambitious, they are very young. They'll be hearing another maybe 5 presidential petitions. Others want to be the chief justices. So they're going to be very careful when they know that at the end of the day, when you make your ruling, people will study it for a long time. And next time we are going for voting, maybe for the Chief Justice position or whatever it is, people are going to hold you accountable. You recall when the Judicial Service Commission has been conducting interviews for judges, some of the judges who made errors in the past, those judgments have come to haunt them. So for me, I think it's important, again, as we keep on saying, if you've got a matter today, please start discussing loudly. Wherever it is, whether it's in the executive, judiciary, wherever it is, make a lot of noise so that by the time the judges sit down to make their ruling, even if it's going to be for a minute,
at stake.
Yeah, they've got all the information at play.
A truth and electoral justice campaign by NASA, how does it sit for NASA ahead of that pre-trial hearing and then the hearings, of course, for the next 7 days?
NASA made it clear that even though they went to the Supreme Court, they were pursuing a two-pronged approach. They were looking for a political solution to this and a legal solution. So I think this movement that they are starting is basically supposed to champion the political solution to all this, in the sense that they want to deal with the court of public opinion in championing for a truthful and very flawless electoral process, which I think is working. And from where I see it, it's also, building up on the pressure that they want to put on the Supreme Court judges, that this is not just an issue that you want to wish away sitting together. This is an issue that entails the voting bloc of this entire country, and we had 15 million plus of Kenyans who voted. And therefore, I think by running with that kind of movement, it sort of brings to the public domain, that public interest element, that it is in the interest of the public, that even if the Supreme Court judges are going to make any ruling, they understand that some of these sentiments, also resonate with the public, that there is need to have a clarity on the electoral process and a clarity on what happened and fidelity to the rule of law in conducting these elections. And I also believe...
Yes, from a messaging perspective, what do they mean, NASA, when they say we'll not accept and move on? Does that mean they will not accept the verdict of the Supreme Court?
Yeah, I mean, from a communication perspective, you'd think that by making such statements in public, they're basically trying to pile pressure and, insinuate that they have other alternatives, that, the Supreme Court verdict is not the end of their course in terms of, because there is this perception among, NASA and many people who believe in the NASA cause,
right,
that if things go the way they are, Kenyans are likely to lose hope in the electoral system. They're likely to have this sense of belief and resignation that, there is no need for voting when whatever we cast does not amount to anything. So I think making such public pronouncements basically reawakens the consciousness of people who believe like that. And remember, I think public interest has become a very big thing in Kenya, and to a large extent, when you bring the masses into all this, you're likely to generate some sense of public interest that is tangible. But I also want to believe that when Honorable Mudavadi talked about each judge to make his own pronouncement, I think that is the precedent that has been set. The rulings that we've had in the last few weeks towards the election, I think one of the most refreshing thing was all the judges were going through the rulings, and there was a lot that we were getting from the rulings in terms of basically informing us on the nitty-gritties of the electoral process that we don't know. And I think it happens everywhere. You look at defamation cases, again, there's a way in which guys say that judges are now teaching journalists how to ply their trade. So I want to believe that if we have that elaborate ruling at the spur of the moment, not like it was done in 2013, where we were given a one-paragraph ruling and we were told for an elaborate reasoning, you'll get it later. That later, maybe people didn't have that interest to read it later on.
Mutinda, is NASA winning the public perception war?
Thank you for asking that question, because that is where I wanted to start. Because I have repeatedly had this thing of taking their case to the court of public opinion. And the truth of the matter is that there is no better measure of the court of public opinion than an election. On the 8th of August, we had an election, and everybody had time to take their case to the public, and the public gave their verdict. What is in contest here is the credibility of that verdict. So purporting to be taking your case back to the court of public opinion, to me, is just plain politics. It's trying to get away from the hard facts about the issues they are raising, because what they are saying is that, okay, we had a measure of the court of public opinion on the 8th, but the verdict that was given is not the verdict that represents what Kenyans say. That is the issue here. And we need to stick to that issue. Now, we have an institution called IEBC, which they've questioned. Of course, the interested parties having been competing in the election. So now we've gone to another institution, so that that institution can really tell us whether whatever they are purporting about IEBC and the 8th August election has got any truth, has got any basis, whether it is credible, and whether they have evidence, and whether that evidence meets the threshold of having subverted the will of the people as expressed on the 8th of August. And I think that should be the issue. So when they start saying that they're taking the case to this is not time to take the case to the public. This is time to first, because the public did their verdict on the 8th, and Kenya is divided.
Right.
They are the people who believe what they are saying. There are those who believe what they are saying,
right.
and there are those who believe that the election was credible. So
right.
who will tell us the truth? That is why they have gone to the Supreme Court, so that
right.
we can wait for that.
Dismas, some critics, including Mutinda's Jubilee colleagues, have been saying NASA are doing this because they do not have solid evidence going into these hearings. What would you say to that?
Well, we'll only determine whether or not they've got solid evidence when they begin doing their presentations at the Supreme Court. Right now, you see a lot of paperwork going around, and it takes a bit of time for you to be able to understand what they're capturing. So the average Kenyan will form a view whether or not they've got evidence when they go to the Supreme Court. But at the end of the day, really, it's not even about the 7 judges who matter. It's just going to be 4 judges if they are able to be persuaded by what NASA is presenting. So
what do you mean by that?
I mean, assuming that it's going to be a full bench of 7 judges, right. you only need to have 4 judges supporting your cause. Like, for instance, for NASA, I suspect they're lawyers, and one hopes they've got a very superior strategy, that they'll be targeting 4 lawyers and looking at those judges, how they've been doing their rulings in the past, how they look at petition cases, and target the 4 lawyers. So I would imagine that's what would be their strategy. So right now, you wouldn't expect anybody from Jubilee, including Mr. Kavemba here, to say that in fact NASA has a very strong case. What they'll want to do is to dismiss everything. And you saw what President Kenyatta has done today. Asking Raila Odinga to accept and move on. There are the elections. We've done an election. You may not be happy with the outcome, but you are my brother, you are my good friend. Accept and move on. So now the big question is, when you tell Mr. Raila Odinga to accept and move on, and yet he's contesting those figures, what is he supposed to accept? And where is he supposed to move to? Because as far as he's concerned and his supporters, they claim this election was stolen. They talk about computer-generated leadership. They talk about software-generated leaders. So it's important for these at least to have 4 judges at the Supreme Court form a view. And that's the view which is going to be legally binding. And when you hear Raila Odinga saying that this election is going to be the last which is going to be stolen, is merely reminding people that he's got options. And they've been talking about civil disobedience, they've been talking about demonstrations, they've been talking about picketing. And one forms a conclusion that essentially Raila Odinga is telling the Supreme Court that if you do not make a ruling which reflects the will and aspirations of majority of Kenyans, and as far as he's concerned, he believes he's got a majority of Kenyans because he says his numbers were interfered with, then I've got a lot more options left for me. And one hopes that the options he's talking about are not going to lead the nation into turmoil, but he can deploy his options. The kind of magic he has, or the magic bullet he has that he's going to deploy to ensure that no other election is going to be stolen, is welcome for this democracy, provided he does that guided by the Constitution.
For the last few days, we've seen the lineups for all the sides that are involved in this presidential petition. We have seen some of the lawyers, the legal teams, IEBC's legal team, NASA's legal team. Hesbon, from what you've seen, where is this petition likely to be won or lost?
From what I've depicted from the NASA petition, I think all the prayers that they have in their petition are basically calling for the judges to render the whole election null and void. So I think they've put it in a very tricky way that if they get any ruling that goes their direction, they're actually home and dry. That any one ruling among at least the 4 main prayers that they have, they'll have, their agenda met. And I think from their stellar cast of lawyers, you'd say that these lawyers are going to be strictly focused on each of those many prayers that they have, so that if any of those prayers is answered, they have the whole thing, done and dusted with. But I must say that, it's not as easy as people want to believe, make it look in the public domain. Because if you listen to, commentators talk about what evidence NASA have, and they're from the Jubilee side, they rubbish the whole thing. You know, if you listen to guys who are sympathetic to the NASA cause, they are actually talking about very concrete evidence. They have a lot of belief in the galaxy of lawyers that NASA has on board. And basically what you are looking at is how then these lawyers are going to argue their cases, especially the NASA lawyers, and you know, convince the Supreme Court judges to listen to their prayers. But then the other thing is, you know, whatever NASA has brought on board, you may want to ask yourself, you know, the burden of proof definitely is on NASA, but there is also the evidential burden, you know, that is on IBC lawyers, just to prove that whatever NASA is entreating is basically on very shaky ground and does not hold water, and even if it did, it doesn't have enough water to render the election invalid.
Yes, this one.
Ben, you know, it doesn't matter the number of lawyers Jubilee has or the kilos of evidence, because now we are told that it's 25,000 pages. You can easily get it into kilos. So that one is immaterial. In my view, what matters is the quality of the lawyer that is going to be leading their case, and whether that lawyer has got a superior understanding of law and how he's going to prosecute his evidence. That would be number one. And then number two, whether those lawyers actually understand the thinking of all the judges. Because I've been doing a lot of research. The way it works in the US, you look at those Supreme Court judges and what tickles their fancy, what makes them excited. Like, for instance, if you're on the NASA side, when you look at Justice Maraga, he's said to be conservative. He loves his Bible. He's an elder in the SDA church. So you're supposed to approach him from that side. What would be Maraga be looking for in my presentation? I understand for Justice Philomena Mwilu, she sits on the fence. She doesn't.
Does it matter the lawyers that IBC have?
It really doesn't matter. What really matters is how you're going to prosecute your case, because now NASA is the one which is supposed to move the court and come forward with the evidence. So when you're doing a presentation, like for instance, we are told that Justice Lenaula is very liberal, a very sharp lawyer. He loves reading. So you should know how to approach Justice Lenaula when you're doing the presentation. I would imagine that you should even attempt to establish eye contact with Lenaula, so that you know you are looking at him and you're making sure that you understand his body language. You should, if you're a good lawyer, you're going to the Supreme Court, you should even know when the lawyer is, or rather, if the judge is yawning when he's taking a glass of water, what does that mean? And how do you do that?
Are you saying you believe that NASA has superior lawyers?
Well, I don't know, because, you know, nobody has come out to confirm the number of lawyers. Of because course. On Friday night you saw Dr. Uchenda Molo, who we are made to understand is a very superior litigation lawyer. You also understand that Kaluma is part of the deal. But they have not given the full list because, for some reason, again, there are media reports that these lawyers have been under a lot of pressure from some hidden forces. There are a number of them who are supposed to sign on those petition papers. When they were supposed to do that, they became Taja Wasima Patikani kwa sasa. There's a lot of pressure. Maybe that's why they're hiding it till the last minute. But in my view, there are two key issues that those lawyers should be looking for, and maybe they should pay me for this advice, that it's supposed to be qualitative and quantitative. When you're looking at quantitative, try to tell us how the numbers do not add up. And I think they are working on that, because they are saying it's a bit peculiar. It's disturbing that you have 2.6% of the voters who did not know what they're doing at the ballot station, or rather at the polling station. There are all those are spoiled votes. And there's an argument that if you go to the polling station and you are electing presidency and you have Esbonia and Kavemba, if I don't like these two candidates, am I not supposed to be given the opportunity to cross all their names so that my views count? So that's going to be an important thing. And then the second is on the qualitative aspects, because they're saying now there are a number of inconsistencies.
All right.
There was a pre-campaign financing where the incumbent used the public resources to give him an advantage. If they're able to look at it from those two perspectives, then they probably stand a chance of presenting a strong case.
Mutsinda, what do you think about this?
This is, you know, elections are about the people. It is an exercise of, it is actually the only time we get to exercise our sovereignty directly. And courts of law make rulings based on evidence. So I beg to differ with the reasons that whatever my fellow panelist is trying to explain that the lawyers should be keen on. I honestly think that is really besides the point. The point is, do you have evidence to support your allegations. That is the key thing here. And if you've looked at the NASA case, it has two issues that have been brought out. First is the issue of the electoral law, that there are certain incidences where Jubilee was in direct violation of the law. They've talked about voter bribery. They've talked about the case of Makueni, where they are saying there was intimidation. And there are very many other examples that they are trying to quote to bring out the issue of illegality. Right. Then there is the issue of figures. There is the issue of figures, that there was tampering of figures, that there are some areas where NASA's votes were not indicated as captured truly, as was the case in the ground, and that there are cases where Jubilee's votes were increased to a certain extent. So according to me, and my humble opinion is that this will boil down to whether they can prove the allegations that there was tampering of the figures, that there were votes that were meant to go to the NASA candidate that never got there, right. And that there are areas where the Jubilee presidential candidate was given more than he'd gotten. Why am I saying this? Because that is the essence of an election. And if, for instance, it is found that there were some few errors, probably due to negligence, human error, and the figures that were associated to those few errors were such that they could not change the overall figure, then I do not see the Supreme Court judges trying to overturn the will of the people, because this is very serious. Right. That's why I'm talking about that. For them to overturn what IEBC announced, they have to have
must have had an effect on the final results.
Exactly, substantive effect on the final results, such that if these errors were corrected, then the final result would have been the NASA presidential candidate would have won. Or, for instance, that the Jubilee presidential candidate would have won, but not with 50% plus one. But for as long as whatever, the court proves, it still remains that the Jubilee candidate won, had the majority votes, and had gotten 50% plus one, and over 25% in more than 24 counties. I do not see how Supreme Court is going to overturn.
All right, of course, we're keeping an eye on that, and the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IEBC, says they have handed in the forms 34 A, B, and C. Of course, we are expecting the pre-trial and, of course, the beginning of the hearings. When we return after this quick commercial break, we shall be taking a look at something else, still in politics. Today, Kenyans marked 39 years since the demise of the founding father, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. Moremi Mwangi did take a look at the politics of this country and how they have been shaped by the dynasties, the two dynasties, the Odinga and Kenyatta families. We'll take a look at that when we return.